It is Wednesday, May 27th. I want to welcome all of you to this morning's committee meeting. My name is Herb Wesson, and I am the chair of this committee. At this juncture, I am the only member of the committee that's here. So, Mr. City Attorney, the actions that we take until I get another couple of members will be deemed communiques or communications from the chair.
Sure.
Okay, so with that said, we have 14 items on today's agenda. Items 2 through 12, I think we can dispense of as if they were on the consent calendar. And then we'll discuss items 1, 13, and 14. With that, I do need your blessing, though, Mr. City Attorney. May I do that?
Yes, so items 2 through, are they all to be approved, or any of them continued items?
Well, there's a couple of continue items. What I'll do, I'll have the CLA read the items, and then I will indicate what actions we will take as communique from the chair. With that said, Madam CLA, would you please read item 2?
Item number 2 is a communication for, is a CRA and CLA report and resolution relative to a loan agreement with the Sherman Village Apartments Meta Housing. This is for a $4.4 million financing of a 73-unit apartment, affordable housing project.
Okay, then on item 2, as a communique from the chair, we'll adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item 3.
Item 3 is a continued item. This is CRA and City Attorney reports and the CLA to report on an ordinance relative to extending the date of effectiveness for the Earthquake Disaster Assistance Redevelopment Plan for East Hollywood.
Okay, we'll adopt the CLA report, again, as a communique from the chair. 4.
Item number 4 is CRA and a CLA report relative to amending the Chinatown Commercial Incentives and Facade Improvement Program. This is to create Chinatown business incentive programs and to increase the maximum amount of assistance.
Okay, we'll adopt the CLA report on item 4, bringing us to item 5.
5 is a CRA and a CAO report and resolutions. This is relative to the construction and permanent loan agreement with AmCal Sunrise Fund LP, not to exceed $890,000 for the development of Sunrise Apartments.
Okay, item 5, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 6.
Item number 6, CRA and CAO report and resolution relative to providing $200,000 to the LA Unified School District and up to $70,000 to the Department of Rec and Parks for the development of the Wilshire Boulevard Public Park located on Wilshire Boulevard.
Okay, we will adopt the CAO report as well on that item. That brings us to item 7.
Item number 7 is a continued item. This is CRA and CLA to report relative to the DDA with Therapeutic Living Center for the Blind.
Okay, now we continue that item because we were waiting for a report or something?
Yes.
Okay, then that's item 7?
Item number 7.
We'll adopt the CLA report on that, bringing us to item 8.
Item number 8 is an LA Housing Department and a CAO report relative to an administrative fee for processing of appeals of residential unit status determinations for the Muni Code for residential hotel unit conversion and demolition ordinance.
Okay, on item 8, we'll adopt the CAO report. And where is Ms. Barclay this morning?
Ms. Barclay is probably having a good time.
As if we're not.
And getting her sleep.
We allow people to have good times.
Does that mean you're not?
No, I think Mr. Ray, we've been joined by my wingman, Councilman Ed Reyes, who suggests that you're not having a good time. And later I will expect somebody to explain to me in detail the definition of good time and where one might be having that good time. Okay, that brings us to item 9.
Item 9 is a CDD report and a CAO report relative to the Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan, second year action plan.
Okay, then we'll adopt the CAO report
Yes.
with amendments.
Yes, Councilman, this has an amendment to it. This is, again, item number 9. The amendment would be to remove $250,000 from the additional program income added to the 35th year and carry in deficit, and to add it to a new line item in the neighborhood improvements, line item, Denver Shirt Pals.
Okay, so we'll adopt it with the amendment, and we'll receive and file the
Yes,
CDD
the CDD
report.
report.
Bringing us to a motion in item number 10.
Item number 10 is motion Weezer Labange relative to amending the terms of a loan agreement with the Greater Los Angeles Agency on Deafness to extend the term of repayment through September 1st, 2013.
Well, even though they're not members of this committee, since Ed and I like Mr. Weezer, we will, and we like Tom too, so we will adopt that motion. That brings us to item 11.
Item 11, again, is motion Labange Weezer relative to reconveyance of 24,000 square feet of land located on Lankershim Boulevard, known as the theater site, to Snyder and Oho Third LLC.
Okay, item 11 will adopt the motion. That brings us to item 12. That is a continued motion, and I'm having a senior moment. I don't remember what that item is. If you could just read it for me.
Sure. This is motion Rosenthal, Hahn, Wesson, relative to amending the Muni Code relative to where the owner is required to pay relocation assistance within 15 days of service of a notice of termination by either party subsequent to the issuance of a demolition permit.
Okay.
This was also referred to planning.
Okay, on that item, we will continue that item. Okay, so, Mr. City Attorney, even though we're joined by Mr. Reyes, we still don't have a quorum, so all of those items that we took action on will be based on a communication or communique from the chair.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, that brings us to item number 1. Madam CLA, if you could read item number 1.
Item number 1 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Ms. Belinda Vega to the Rent Adjustment Commission for the term ending May 20th, 2010.
Good morning.
Good morning, council members.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We want to thank you in advance for your desire to serve the great city of Los Angeles. So why don't you take a moment, if you will, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you think you bring.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be nominated for this position. I am a native from Los Angeles. I was born and raised in La Puente, California, not the city of Los Angeles, but I'm now a resident of Hollywood, California. I went to UCLA. I went to Columbia Law School, and I'm now an attorney at O'Malveny & Myers. I've been there for about 10 years, and I love the city, and I think I would do a good job.
You have any other experience serving on boards or commissions?
I have served on a number of boards. I've served on mostly fundraising boards. I served on the Ketchum YMCA, the Downtown YMCA Board of Directors, and raises money for the YMCA, which is basically it provides inner city service to the area around downtown. And then I also served on the Memorial Hospital Board. Memorial Hospital is a hospital in East Los Angeles, and I served on their charitable board as well. I also, as a lawyer, I've dealt with a number of agencies. I've done a lot of agency law in the area of environmental protection, mostly in the defense side.
Well, believe it or not, in my younger days, I did some fundraising for a YMCA program or two myself, so I commend you for that. Why the Writ Adjustment Commission?
Well, to be honest, I was asked to serve, and I am very happy to serve. I think it's very important. Number one, I think housing issues are very important in Los Angeles, and I think the purpose of the commission is one that we have to keep in mind as we go forward in making sure that our city provides housing for individuals and at the same time grows, and at the same time, especially in the downtown area, we want it to be economical and we want it to develop business, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're treating all individuals fairly and providing housing for individuals that can't afford it. So I think it's a very important commission, and I'm very committed to serving.
Well, wonderful. Mr. Reyes, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you may have a question or two for Ms. Vega, even though I can assure you that your confirmation will go a lot smoother than Judge Sotomayor.
That is probably correct.
I think
Although-
I'm going out on a limb here.
I wish her a lot of luck, but that's
We all wish her a lot of luck. It's just, now that we're getting older, it's to a point where we're seeing American success stories with some regularity, and I think that it's important for people to believe that anything is possible. We've just been joined by the president of the Los Angeles City Council, Eric Garcetti. So, Mr. CLA, we have a quorum, so we're legit. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say thank you to you for joining us, and you've been asked and you've responded in a positive way. When you speak of the inner city neighborhoods, which ones come to your mind, and which areas are you familiar with? Because there's a whole range of neighborhoods.
I agree. I mean, my parents are immigrants. When my parents first came to the United States, it was 1973, and they came to Watts, California. That's where they came. I was born at Hoover Hospital. So when I speak of the inner city communities, I mean the surrounding areas around LA City. I mean, mid-LA City, Pico
Right.
Union, which has changed a lot. The areas that make up downtown LA, which are changing, I think, a lot, and have changed a lot over the years.
Right, and I think there's the reason why I ask is those of us who've seen these changes and worked hard to promote these changes, there's an inadvertent consequence in that because they've changed so much with the new facilities, that people who used to live there are now being pushed out. And so the function you play, I think, is very critical in terms of understanding the different languages and immigrant experience. How would that lend itself in the role you see yourself playing in this particular board?
Well, I think I could be very useful. I mean, obviously, I speak Spanish. My parents are both Mexican and immigrants from Mexico, but this city is so diverse. I mean, we're dealing with Koreatown, we're dealing with Chinatown, we're dealing with different cultures. Just in downtown LA, one of the issues that we dealt with in terms of the YMCA was trying to provide services for very different cultures, very diverse cultures, in an area where there's not a whole lot of services. There's not, preschool services. There's not after-school programs. So I think just coming from an experience where my parents did not have a lot of money and depended a lot on city services, I think would be useful in my role as commissioner. Of course, I'd be dealing with housing issues and rent adjustment issues,
Right.
but I think my awareness of the fact that many of these communities really depend on the city to provide certain services, I think would be useful.
And I just wanted to amplify the fact that you are where you're at today and been able to achieve that goal, knowing what it takes to get there. I want to thank you and congratulate you. And I'm hoping that many more Latinas and just folks in general who know that struggle can see you and say, it can be done, and you're an inspiration. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. You guys are also an inspiration. Eric Garcetti is alum of Columbia Law School, so I appreciate it very much. I owe it to my parents, obviously, but thank you.
You want us to appoint you to something?
No, that's all right. Yes, that's very generous, Mr. Chair.
In fact, Mr. President, before you start, you weren't here last
I got
week.
appointed to something.
And so I'm going to file my official complaint with you today, since generally or historically the finals of the American Idol took
yeah.
place in your district. And
right.
so I just want you to know that I'm protesting because the wrong person won.
Thank you. I am in complete agreement with that.
And I'm appalled.
And I don't want to say there's a connection, but the finals moved from my district to Miss Perry's district this year for the first time, and there may be some sort of causal
Where?
connection.
Sergeant, find Miss Perry. She's in on this.
She's
Okay.
responsible this time. No, I just want to congratulate you on the nomination very much, and very impressive resume, and actually I didn't graduate from law school there. I went to undergrad and grad school
I
there as well.
apologize.
But no, not at all. I wasn't as smart as you to get into law school there. But I wanted to ask you a couple questions about housing stuff, because this is traditionally been such an important commission for policy as well as looking actually at rent adjustment issues. And it's a very difficult moment in our city because on one hand there's some very important policy issues that we want to move forward on affordable housing, but of course the economy is not where it was a year and a half ago. And we have a softening a little bit of the rental market, but tell us a little bit of what your impression
Good
is
work, Sergeant.
oh, here she is.
Here she
She's
is.
the one who did it.
There's the culprit.
Just to catch you up, Ms. Perry, I'm sure you shared the chairman's disappointment of the winner of American Idol last week? Yeah. Okay. And we were just making the
She's in
connection.
on it. She's not
She
upset.
thought that he thought that it was because it was in my district, but I pointed out it moved to your district this year, so.
Well, no, I was more upset that medium was taken off the air.
We'll get to that later. That's item 13. But what can we do to balance, the economic situation and still move forward aggressively with policy, especially on the end of, looking at inclusionary zoning or mixed income housing, looking at building more affordable housing, and getting past some of our traditional NIMBYism in the city, which is, most people don't want anything to be built. So we have places like West LA where there's 5 jobs for every unit of housing.
Right.
Places like, our districts here where we have, too few jobs and a lot of the housing is clustered now. How do you address that?
And it's a very tough question. I appreciate the question. I think we have to be innovative in our thinking, probably bring in the community, and I know that we do that already to a certain extent, but definitely involve community members and community organizations so they can help us come up with ideas. I think it's difficult. I'm having, I'm both on the business, seeing the business side of things and wanting LA to develop and to become, a business giant as it used to be for lawyers and for other business people. I see both sides. We want that as well as we want to be able to have affordable housing, and we want to have the availability to have areas where people can, if we're going to move in business, where people can live affordably. So I see the tension there. I think it's important to have the community involved. I think it's important to have community organizations involved, and maybe to be innovative, maybe to start depending on some of these businesses to say, okay, if we want to develop economically and we want to be able to provide affordable housing, you guys need to do your part. You guys need to come in and maybe, we can develop programs where you're investing in the community as well, and it makes sense for you business-wise. You're getting some kind of return in the investment. At these times, I agree that it's difficult. So I think this is the time to be innovative and to start bringing in more people, so we get more ideas, and hopefully with more ideas we get better ideas.
Yeah, sure. And did you grow up in the Los Angeles area?
I did. I actually grew up in Los Angeles. I'm sorry, in La Puente, which is LA County.
We count, don't worry.
But I now live in Los Angeles.
Great. Okay, super. Thanks so much.
Your district, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
No,
outside
actually, I'm
Crispin
not.
in CD5 probably?
I'm 90046. So I think yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Vega? We've been joined by Councilwoman Jan Perry, so I'll let the record show that. Anyway, without objection, I would, this committee would recommend your appointment to the full council. And just as an aside, when I was a kid, my favorite name in the world was Vega, because I wanted to be my fictional hero, who was Don Diego Vega, who was Zorro. So,
It's a good name.
Yeah. Are you related to Zorro?
No,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm not.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you, and again, without objection, we'll recommend you to the full council.
Thank you very much.
Madam CLA, that brings us to item 13.
Yes.
I heard you, Jan.
Did you? Okay. Did you hear it all?
All right.
Did you hear it all?
What?
Yeah, we'll talk about downstairs. Yeah, you explained it.
Wait, she didn't say what you just wrote.
I hope not.
Okay.
Was it, is that?
Wait, let me check.
No, that's what.
That was a great movie, though. Mr. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you guys have a whole different perspective on things.
You got it. Mr. City Attorney, on the consent items that we took action on, 2 through 11, if there's no objection, let's move that to the council as a recommendation of this committee and not as a communique from the
Correct.
chair.
With item 9, with the amendment.
Okay? Madam CLA, item 13.
Item 13 is an LHD report and a CAO CLA report relative to various actions related to Round 1 of the 2009 Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Round 2 Notice of Funding Availability, and the 2009 Permanent Supportive Housing Program, NOFA, and Cooperation Agreement.
Okay, let's see, do I have... Okay, I have one public comment card on item 13, so I'll ask, I think it's Anson Snyder, and then after that, if you could come forward, and then after that, we'll have the city people come up. Good morning. Wait, you got your own choice.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning, Mr. Snyder.
Good morning. Good morning, council members. I'm Anson Snyder. I am a board member of the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation. My residence is West Hollywood, by the way. And I'm also the chairman of the Laurel Place West Hollywood Corporation. We have a project that's being presented for your approval for funding under this item this morning, and I just want to say from the corporation, the board of directors, we greatly appreciate it. This is 2 nonprofits working together, the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation and WASIT. We are working with the Stovall Housing Corporation to do another 32 units, a Section 202 HUD grant, which is fully funded, and we're going to be receiving funds, hopefully, from the City of Los Angeles today, to build 32 units, new construction, senior housing, down at MLK and Figueroa, next to Stovall Terrace. What's great about this project, it's going to be fully funded, it doesn't need any other sources, and it's nonprofits working together to get affordable housing built. So I wanted to say thank you very much, and thank you for your consideration, and hopefully funding will go through today.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, please. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning, Anime Utam from the CAO. The joint CAO-CLA report before you recommends authority for the Housing Department to issue approximately $6.2 million in funding commitments for 2 projects qualified through the 2009 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Round 1 Notice of Funding Availability. The proposed developments would result in a combined total of 72 units of affordable housing for families and seniors. The recommended funding awards would leverage an estimated $50 million in outside funding sources. At this time, Housing Department is recommending that no low-income housing tax credit funded projects be recommended. All tax credit projects that submitted applications under Round 1 will be considered under Round 2. The report also recommends authority to release the 2009 Permanent Supportive Housing Program Notice of Funding Availability, which includes $13.8 million for capital and project-based Section 8 rental assistance vouchers. Authority to amend the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Permanent Supportive Housing Program NOFA policies to clarify issues and make regulations consistent with industry standards are also included in the report. The policies reflect recommended changes based on input received from the collaborative and other stakeholders. Staff are here to answer any questions you may have with regards to the 2 programs.
Now, what do we anticipate the funding is going to be around 2?
For Round 2, it would be approximately $30 million.
You want to identify yourself so that your bosses will know that you came to work?
We actually were here. Yeah, I'm Sean Spear. I'm the Director of Major Projects for the Housing Department. I'm joined by Tim Elliott.
I'm Tim Elliott, manager of the trust fund.
Okay. Are there any other? Ms. Perry?
Yeah, I just wanted to know the current status of the cooperative agreement, or the cooperation agreement between the departments of the trust fund, and I believe it expires June 30th. So, does anybody know what the status is of the agreement?
Sure. I think as it's mentioned in the CLA-CAO report, those negotiations have been ongoing for a little over a year now. We have essentially 18 negotiating points that we've been working through, and we're down to sort of the last two. We're hopeful that we'll be able to sort of wrap up the negotiations over the coming month, and at the very least, we would come forward with an agreement probably before the next recommendations would come to you on round two, which would be in August.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to request a report back in 2 weeks with a draft of the agreement to the committee. Make sure we're on track.
I don't think that that'll be a problem, because it's my understanding that amendments, in the event that we move forward, we'll add amendments that will instruct them. We were going to instruct them to report back within 30 days on the progress. So if you want it to be done in 2 weeks, just so we can see where we are, I don't see that as a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then without objection, we will adopt the joint CAO-CLA report with the amendments. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 14.
14. Item 14 is a mayor's report relative to the community development block grant funding awarded under ERA. This item was also referred to the ad hoc committee on economic recovery and reinvestment.
Good morning.
Good morning. Rhonda Gaston, Mayor's Office of Housing and Economic Opportunity. This morning I'm going to briefly discuss the correspondence from the mayor announcing the city's CDBG award under ERA, give you some advice of the application submission requirements, and summarize the process that was employed to develop a proposed budget. The mayor issued a letter to the council and to the general public on May 20th. I believe CDD today will provide for the committee, they may be en route, an addendum to that particular report that provides line item detail on the budget that was attached to the mayor's letter. Because we were under such a time crunch and the letter had to go out for public participation in order for us to meet the June 5th submission date to HUD, we sent the letter out without the actual footnotes that generally would accompany a CDBG transmittal. But that is forthcoming this morning. The city's award is $19.2 million. The guidance from HUD related to the regulatory requirements was issued on May 6th, and we have a June 5th submission date to request approval of a substantial change to the city's 2008-2009 CDBG action plan. In this substantial amendment, the city is required to address how each of the line item or the activities meet the legislative intent of ERA for the job creation and preservation, and assist residents that are most impacted by the national economic climate. To ensure the city's ability to develop a plan meeting the express program design criteria, HUD has provided alternatives in terms of specific waivers related to the public participation process that was truncated from its normal 30-day requirement down to a 7-day public participation requirement. The public benefit test that usually accompanies all economic development activity has been waived, and HUD has also granted some flexibility for exchanging project funding sources so that projects that were previously anticipated by the city to be funded from other sources can actually be funded within the city's ERA allocation. As I mentioned before, we have a 30-day turnaround. The guidance was issued on the 6th. We have until the 5th to submit it. Backing into that date, we were given about a 2-week turnaround to prepare a budget. In order to do so, the mayor convened a working group that included representatives of the council offices, the CLA, the CAO, and CDD as the CDBG administrator. The group was charged with determining how to apportion funds between the CDBG budget categories, developing policy recommendations such as whether or not the city would seek a waiver of the public services cap, and developing the proposed line item budget detail, which was attached to the mayor's transmittal to you. The city is requesting the waiver for the public services cap. The mayor will correspond direct with the HUD secretary to ensure that that happens. But
when do we think we'll get this is trying to go from 15 to 25%?
Correct.
When do we think we'll get some?
That I'm not sure of, but I did correspond with our DC staff this morning and was asked to ensure that I tell the committee that we do have specific challenges in getting that waiver, particularly because the secretary may not have sole discretion in granting it because it is a statutory requirement rather than a regulatory one. So the mayor will initiate those conversations, but we are not sure what the outcome will be.
So who has to take this action then? If you're saying that he can't do it alone, is it an act of Congress?
It may be an act of Congress because it is a statutory requirement. The cap is actually written into the CDBG law.
Okay, so when you say it may be, how can we find out?
The mayor's office is actually doing its reconnaissance right now, and the mayor will correspond directly with the secretary to see what discretion he has and what the next steps would be.
So you would be?
Our DC staff is working on the issue right now to find out.
I mean, what I guess is, what I'm hearing from you is that you believe that it will take some kind of congressional act.
I don't know that it will.
The mayor is trying to see what kind of, but I mean, it is the belief of the DC people that this is something that the secretary cannot do on his own, so that there needs to be some act of Congress.
That was the communication that I received this morning, yes.
So if that, I mean, and I would think you guys follow the scenario out. If that's the case, and let's say if the mayor has discussions with the secretary and there's still nothing the secretary can do we have a timeline on how quickly something like this could move in Congress?
Not at this time, but I'd be happy to report back to the committee with detail in that regard.
See, what I would be doing, if you guys think that that's the case, then I would do whatever is necessary now to initiate somebody sticking this into some action where there's going to be a vote. I would not wait. I would at least begin preparing, and that's what I would recommend, that there be some conversation between your office and the D.C. people to look at a way to tee this up, because, you know, for the 3 years that I've been here, this has been a concern that all of us felt that cap should be raised, and we want to take advantage of it, and I believe that we might have a Congress that would be favorable to doing that, and that we might have a president that would be favorable to seeing that this occur. So if the secretary does not have the power to wave a magic wand and make it happen, it's in our best interest to jump on this now. Go on.
Based on the recommendation of the working committee that I previously described, the final budget that was transmitted to council for consideration includes an allocation of approximately $8 million, or 41% of the 19.2 for economic development projects, $2.3 million, or 12% for housing-related activity, $2.2 million, or 11% for neighborhood improvements, and $4.1 million, or 25% for public services, and $1.9 million for the required allocation for planning and administrative activities. As a result of the budget, an aggregate number of approximately 1,300 permanent jobs will be realized, and that is actually a little more than 200% of the required number of jobs that we would have to actually realize if the public benefit test was required of the city. I'd like to bring to the committee's attention that the housing activity that was funded in this plan was as a result of a prior council action taken this past March to allocate up to 15% of the CDBGR budget as matching funds for city applications under the state Prop C program. As approved, the mayor and council allocated funding to 6 specific projects for a total of $2.6 million, but under this budget, we demonstrate only $2.3 million going for those projects, a reduction of $300,000. Thus, it may be required that a technical adjustment to the prior council action be made. And moving the budget forward, the CDD has published the plan in accordance with the city's public participation plan and will host a community hearing at the Echo Park Library this evening at 6 o'clock to allow for public comment. We fully anticipate that the city's approval process will be completed and we'll have the plan to HUD by June 5th as required. And that's it in summary, but at this time I would defer to CDD for more information and they can actually go through their transmittal report.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Perry.
I wanted to ask a quick question on item 11 under economic development, the Cleantech Manufacturing Center and Solidville, Breda rail car manufacturing facility. Now, it was my understanding that this project was going to be put out to RFP. Has it been put out to RFP?
My understanding is and Steve Andrews may be in the room who can actually speak to this, but my understanding is it would go out to RFP if the Breda negotiations failed, and I believe there's supposed to be a decision made on that this Thursday. Oh, Cal.
So, hi Cal, how are you? Long time no see.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Cal Hollis.
Yeah. Did it go out to RFP?
It has not yet gone out to RFP. The purpose of these funds is to provide additional access to the site. We believe we have the opportunity to acquire some property.
So is it going to go out to RFP or not?
I believe that at least a portion of the site will go out to RFP.
So how's that deal set up? I was my understanding that this project was not tied necessarily, or not necessarily just directly given to Ansaldo Breda. It was my understanding that it was going to be put out to RFP. Now I see that Ansaldo Breda appears, based on the description, that they've been awarded the project. Is it, or this is their project already?
The Redevelopment Agency Board, Redevelopment Agency Board approved an exclusive negotiating agreement with Ansaldo Breda for a portion of the site that's subject to the MTA's action on Thursday. If the MTA action is to award the train options to Ansaldo Breda, we were entered into a period of time to negotiate for a portion of the site. If that action is not taken by the MTA, it's our plan to issue an RFP for the entire site. If the MTA approves Ansaldo Breda, our plan is to issue an RFP for the balance of the site.
And then if the MTA approves Ansaldo Breda on Thursday, then how big is the site and how much would be put out to RFP?
Currently it's approximately 20 acres of the site. Approximately 14 acres would be used for the rail manufacturing and 6 acres would be remaining. The item that's before you, it would allow us to add to some funds to acquire additional property to put additional users on the property.
Now, the funds that are to be added, are they tied directly to satisfying the contingency that Ansaldo Breda prevails on Thursday, or can they be used no matter what happens?
No, it improves access to the site. It would be our intent to explore acquisition of the site no matter what happens at the MTA board.
Okay. All right, and then the other question I had was on 13, the e-cullet recycling materials with the proposal to do a blighted warehouse and improve it. Has there been a site selected for that?
I believe they are looking at alternative sites in the Hollywood area.
Any other areas?
Not to my knowledge.
We've been working with this company, and they have sensors in trash cans for recycling that actually rewards people with like free coupons and stuff when they recycle. And so it's been a pretty innovative company in other places, and we've lured them to Los Angeles. So,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to at least get a report back on this item on Ansaldo Breda to find out, one, what happens at the MTA, and then what the follow-up is.
We will do that.
Yeah, thank you. And if we could do that through committee on the record, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, then let's make that an official request. But it's my understanding that there's some discussion that's supposed to take place next week on this item?
There's an item before the MTA agenda on tomorrow, Thursday.
Okay, well, I think I just read about this not too long, so I'm very interested in this myself. So this is something that we'd like to, I would think, keep, continually getting an update on this. So with that said, CDD, you're up.
Good morning, David Esparza, and I apologize for my tardiness this morning.
See, we didn't even know. Just told on yourself.
It's kind of hard to disguise that when you walk in and everybody's seated. And our report on this is the fiscal impact, which we wrote in, with the help of the CAO's office, and essentially this will reduce CDD's fiscal impact on the general fund from about $2.7 million down to $1.7 million. So there will be a less of a need for reimbursement from the general fund for our related costs, which has been an issue that we brought before this committee and as well as the council. We will be doing the due diligence on the eligibility and the national objective, which is required under this proposal, reviewing the various projects that come forth. If any of these projects are, cannot meet the timeline, we will be doing the review of subsequent projects that may be recommended, for this too. So we will be doing the due diligence behind this all.
Run that by me one more time, because I want to understand how, because I was going to ask a question about that later, so I may not have to do that.
Oh, all right. CDD, as the administrator for these funds, will be making sure that all of the projects meet the eligibility requirements of the Act and the block grant. It's, because most of the requirements and regulations affecting the block grant also apply to these, and so we will be reviewing them for eligibility and national objectives.
Okay. Yeah. You saved me a question. Go, continue.
I think that all the other items that have been discussed, we are working very diligently to go to the June 5th deadline, meet that, so that everything is prepared and on target. We are actually looking for a June 4th deadline for ourselves, so that we can, be ahead of that. If you have questions, then I'll be more than happy to answer anything else that you have.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you. Do we have any analysis on estimated jobs created by each of these projects?
There was a job estimate given to all of the economic development ones, and I think that Rhonda had commented on the total number of jobs.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up is one of the things we've been talking about in the ad hoc committee and looking at some of the redevelopment, recovery and reinvestment dollars, is that was a priority that we adopted as a city, together with the mayor's office as well. Some of these, clearly you can see, a retail center, a new company locating, are ongoing jobs. And then there's some that are in economic development to some degree, just a couple of them in some other places, thank you, that also show, they're more improvements. And they don't, for a hospital, which, is great, we have the construction jobs or something, it's not, I'd be curious to know, is that somehow linked to new jobs? Because I think when we have precious dollars, one of the things that we have to show, and one of the things HUD's going to audit us, and they promise they're going to audit us as a big city, is, are we just using this to do kind of beautification projects that are one-offs, or are we actually doing things that are, and we understand the need for some of those. Sidewalks are important. So in here, we get to do sidewalks in a year that we otherwise wouldn't, and we'd lay people off. So that's retaining jobs. But other ones, where we're making things look nicer, perhaps, or improving the quality of people's experience in certain facilities, don't necessarily add jobs. And that's a tough decision to make. But have we been able to do that analysis ongoing? I mean, I see here, in some of the, this was handed to me, but like the hospital improvement projects, it shows 50 permanent jobs. So I'd be curious to know, for instance, how does that link, not to pick on one, but, you're improving access, visibility, and patient safety at an emergency and trauma center, which is not a new one. It's not going to close necessarily, but why does that create 50 permanent jobs?
The numbers that are before you in the budget were estimates that were provided to the mayor's office when we actually looked at the projects that would be funded. CDD is continuing its review in terms of the analysis of each and every one of the projects, and they will actually go through the underwriting process and determine what the actual job counts would be. These are estimates before you right now, just based on the applications that were submitted.
And will we be able to look at that before finally voting on this? Is this in council today? I don't know. That's
It's actually an error on Friday in the committee.
Because when you say they're provided, I assume they're provided by the folks who are advocating for these?
Correct.
Right. So, if I'm advocating for my project, it's got thousands of jobs linked to it because, all the spillover effects and at a minimum. And I think that's really where we need to have that hard lens. So as much as you can get that to us before Friday, and look, I know I just picked one out of here, but there's a lot of different projects here, and some of them we may decide are good, even if they're not creating necessarily permanent jobs. Sidewalks, I think, are a good case of that. Housing, we know, is an important. But if we're going to be listing it as economic development, I'd like those to be the ones where we really see permanent jobs. I know some of them we don't have estimates, this truck driver training opportunity one, but I'd love to get some estimates because at the end of the day, I know there's other projects that people have here. I know that Ms. Perry, for instance, submitted a couple to the ad hoc committee, and I'd like to compare apples and see which ones are actually creating the most jobs and ready to go. I mean, we know there has to be a readiness component, but that I think has to be the highest priority of all this money. That's really what the Congress put this money out there for.
We absolutely agree. And when the presenters, each presentation listed both temporary jobs and permanent jobs, so we should, we'll be looking at both of those components.
If you can give us some kind of documentation, just to, where they, and then your take on it. And, it's tough once you've done this much work and have some ownership on it, but if you're still looking at it, I would hope that we have an open enough mind that in a week as you dig at those numbers, they're not all going to come back as every person saying what they said is going to be right.
True.
And then that's where we count on you to tell us where they are right and where they're not.
And we certainly agree with you, Council Member, and I believe in CDD's transmittal, there may be a request for the department to report back to committee once their analysis is completed, and we wanted to have the authority to move projects out or substitute projects as necessary to ensure that we met the criteria of our...
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Ms. Fair.
I just want to ask a quick question about what happens if we don't spend the funds according to federal guidelines, and then, what would be the process for that if we don't? Does that come after the audit? How does that work?
Well, as delineated within the program regulations, the only expenditure guideline that was given to the city is that all monies had to be expended by September 30th, 2012. Milestones between the actual anticipated date of receipt and that actual expenditure date were not detailed. But the guidance does suggest that if the city is not moving forward and reporting the jobs on a quarterly basis, they do have the authority to recapture the funds and redistribute across the nation.
Mr. Reyes.
When you report back on the jobs, can you give us an idea of what criteria you're using? How are we looking at these jobs? Are we looking at entry-level jobs? Are we looking at fast food jobs? Are we looking at, entry-level jobs or career-oriented jobs? Is there any categorization or any kind of analysis or structure to how these jobs are being perceived? Did you have that at the outset, or we just kind of waited to see what was going to be brought to the table?
We did not have that information at the outset, although we're continually working to develop that. Most of the proposals were fairly broad in their nature, and so we have constantly gone back and asked for additional detail, looking to, differentiate between entry-level jobs, white-collar jobs, professional jobs, and construction jobs, even. And so, yes, those are the questions that we are asking in our due diligence.
Okay. When you look at our small and medium-sized businesses who would want to compete in these scenarios, are we providing technical assistance for those entities who essentially are trying to participate in these federal programs? We know there's a lot of paperwork. We know there's a lot of requirements that many of the small and medium-sized businesses are not prepared to address because that's just not within their realm of reality. Are we extending or developing any kind of technical assistance to address these populations?
In the budget, there is a line item for a $250,000 allocation for the Mayor's Office of Small Business Assistance, so that under the leadership of Linda Smith, who's the director of MBOC currently, can take on the task of providing technical assistance to the organizations that you just described.
So at what point does the council office get to announce, recruit, identify, allow for those entities in our respective districts to become part of this process? How do we engage, and how does the council office become part of that dynamic?
I don't have the particulars on that, but I will certainly advise Linda Smith of your question and ask her to report back to the committee.
Okay, so we get a report back on how we're going to establish that interface between the council offices and the opportunities that are being raised, hopefully facilitate your process in trying to get those entities who would qualify for these funds. Last question, when we look at the announcement of the mayor's office about the green tech, green industries, and we look at that corridor, does that particular program or effort, how does that interconnect with what you're doing right now?
To the extent that green is actually included in the budget, we have the Cleantech corridor as a line item to be funded, and certainly the mayor's office would look to actually expand funding for that particular project if in fact any of the other projects fall out of the budget. I'm not sure of any of the other projects that relate to that, but I can certainly go back and check. I'm not as familiar with all of the line items as CDD. I only had the budget at my disposal when I wrote the letter.
My point is our ability to coordinate our opportunities, the time is now. So how we are able to structure those understandings and establish that linkage and amplify that nexus is crucial if we're going to start looking at our green corridors, the river master plan, the specific plans, the changing of entitlements, looking at the relationship between downtown and the river, the neighborhoods along the river itself. And I bring that up within the context of trying to be opportunistic. And with that spirit in mind, eventually I believe we should bring the department heads, Mr. Chair, to a place, whether it's this committee or another committee, that talks about their discretion, how they use their real estate. There's a lot of underused real estate in prime locations throughout the city, and we have not been able to get them to understand that opportunity. And here we have tremendous air rights, tremendous access to land we control as a city that's sitting dormant, could be generating jobs, could be creating a revenue base, direly needed tax funds for our general fund, and the department heads do not seem to be able to leverage what they control. So at what point do you see yourselves reaching that level of coordination? Or do you?
I think the mayor's office will take the lead on coordinating that, but it's outside of my purview. That's under the purview of Bud Overham and Economic Development team. And again, I would certainly take all of your comments back to Bud and his team and ask that there be a report to committee on how to structure the coordination between the mayor's office and the council with the departments.
Well, I have a 4-year dialogue with Mr. Overham on this subject. So I think there comes a time when we
should invite him.
That would be a great idea, Mr. Chair.
So if you would pass on to him that we have an interest in having a discussion with him once he puts together his plan, if in fact there is a plan, we would request that he come and explain it to us.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. And I say this with the most a genuine effort to be cooperative and constructive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, then without objection, we will adopt the mayor's report with the amendments. Madam CLA, is there any other business before this committee?
Yes, Councilman, just to go through the amendments for this project, for this particular item, there's also a requested amendment to make adjustments to the funding budget for Devonshire Pals and for the Los Angeles Boys and Girls Club. It should reflect for Devonshire Pals $69,000 and for the LA Boys and Girls Club $124,000. Additionally, a second amendment would be that the mayor's office also include a list of the underfunded projects requests that submitted to the clerk to also be included as part of the CDBG era working group as for consideration for future funding should any projects fall out. And including also Ms. Perry's amendment to provide a status report on Solidville, Breda, and also to establish a process for the Office of Small Businesses, a small business to communicate with council offices.
Okay, so then these are, you've just read the amendments that go along with us adopting the mayor's report, correct? So
yes,
then,
sir.
without objection, that will be the order of the day. Now, do we have any more business before this committee?
That concludes the agenda.
Okay, then this committee is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.